why did you why do you want to talk about this? And how much pressure do you think he's on? And what are the expectations at Ohio State, not just this year, but like under Day moving forward?
All right. Well, I want to start by making a little bit of an analogy here. We all just watched March Madness. We're all sports fans here. A lot of us probably watched March Madness. In March Madness, you have to win 6 games. This many. Got to win 6 games at the end of the season. If you win it, and there's a certain group of teams where if you win it, that's great. If you don't, they're going to be a little bit disappointed because that's just how good your team is. And you got to win 6 must-win games. And guess what? Most of the time, you don't win it because it's tough to win 6 must-win games in a row. Ohio State has to do half of a March Madness. Ohio State's season, regardless of how you think the Michigan game is going to go, regardless of how you think the Oregon game is going to go, regardless of how you think any of these games are going to go throughout the season for Ohio State, I believe they play Penn State as well. Their season is going to come down to 3 games at the end of the year. They are going to have to make half of a March Madness run and win a national championship. And if they don't, the season is going to be considered a failure from many Ohio State fans' perspectives, if I'm reading the room correctly. And man, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, it's hard to be under more pressure. It's almost like, and guys, Ohio State fans out there, the season starts in September, and I'm going to be tuning in. We're all going to be tuning in. But guess what? The season's going to start late in the year when it's cold out, and it'll be indoors, I'm sure, but late in the year, and you're going to have to win 3 games. And that's what it comes down to. So that's what makes this so intriguing for Ohio State, that they're going to have to win 3. When it's all said and done, they will have to win 3 games in a row and nothing less at the end of the year, and that will determine this team's legacy. And to me, it's fun because they're good enough to win it. So I don't know. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on kind of the, in my opinion, immense pressure that this team faces.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if they don't win the Big Ten championship game, it's 4 games. It'll be the first round, the rounds against the 4 highest ranked conference champions with buys, the semifinals, and then the title. I'm a obviously a Michigan fan. I do kind of find it intriguing, wondering like what happens this year if they lose to Michigan again, but like win it all. I would take losing to Ohio State in almost like a blowout, like what Michigan did to them in 2022, but Michigan wins it all instead. But I wonder if there's just so much frustration about that Michigan game that, I don't know. There's a lot changing this year with the 12-team playoffs. Some would argue that Michigan game doesn't matter anymore. Some would argue that game could matter more because now Michigan and Ohio State could play 2 or even 3 times. Like that rivalry could be even more intense if these 2 programs continue to play at an elite level. My frustration with all of this is the whole fire Ryan Day talk and the fact that people actually think he's not a good coach. It's ridiculous. He's 56-8. He has won a playoff game, which Saban and Harbaugh were some of the other coaches who won playoff games. They're gone. Saban retired. Harbaugh's in the NFL. He's not coming back to college. He's just not. He's going to go to the NFL, and if he fails there, well, then he retires. You have Kirby Smart, you have Ryan Day, you have Dabo Swinney, and you have Kalen DeBoer. Those are the only teams, only coaches who have won playoff games. With those head coaches, only those 4. Correct me if I'm... Oh, no, Sonny Dykes, 5. But the 5-7 TCU was very forgettable. That was sad how they went from 99, only behind Georgia, to 0. I think he's an elite or near elite head coach who's just figuring things out. And I've said this before, I don't think any of Urban Meyer's teams, outside of maybe the 2014 team, would have beaten 2021, but especially 2022 and 2023 Michigan. I don't think they would have. I think those teams were, for 2022, just too explosive and too quick and also too strong at O-line. And the 2023 team was too suffocating at defense while having a quarterback who was ridiculously efficient on third down. Like, the offense wasn't the same, but it was annoyingly good when it needed to be. And the defense was generational. With an S&P Plus rankings, it was up there with 2021 Georgia's defense. Like, that's how good last year's Michigan defense was. So, do you think it's really national title or bust, like you say? And also, do you think that Ryan Day's on the hot seat, or do you think it's just competitive pressure?
If he loses to Michigan, if Michigan comes into Columbus this year and beats Ohio State, especially if Michigan has lost a game or even two at that point and is undefeated, then yes, Ryan Day is on the hot seat. Now it's a different question whether he would deserve to be on the hot seat. I'm not sure about that. If we're going to talk national championship or bust, it depends on what you mean by bust. I do have my concerns about what might happen to Ohio State's roster if they were to come up short, especially in a bad way, because they have partially bought that roster. And sometimes a bought roster doesn't have quite the loyalty that a recruited roster has.
That's a good
So
point.
that's something to keep an eye on, in my opinion. Obviously, I'll just say now, my two favorites to win the national championship are Georgia and Ohio State.
Yes.
Those are my favorites. Regardless of how much of a Michigan fan I am, Ohio State is unbelievably talented this year, and they should be, this, in my opinion, probably the second favorite. I'll give the slight edge to Georgia because Kirby Smart has done it multiple years. So let's get that out of the way. I'm not pretending that Ohio State sucks, but there is a lot of pressure. And the scary thing, it's like almost a little bit like Michigan this year. You can't slip up once. If you slip up once, one game, even one quarter, one play against a good team, and suddenly, poof, I mean, there goes the $13 million and all the offseason hype. And that's what Michigan faced this year. And Michigan faced a 4th and 2 with the season on the line against Alabama. And fortunately for Michigan and for their fan base, for people like us, they converted that 4th and 2. And Ohio State's going to have moments like that. They're going to have to perform. Is it bust? It depends on what you mean by bust. I think they can lose in the Natty and Ryan Day keeps his job. He certainly should. But will the fan base be unhappy? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think as long as he doesn't go 9-3 in the regular season, I think he's keeping his job entering next year.
Yeah.
It's just with the record he's had, if he goes 10-2 especially with the schedule they face, if they go 10-2, they'll make the playoff.
For sure.
I'd place an infinite amount of money on that. I wouldn't say that. There are some teams who I think could go 11-1 and even be snubbed from the playoff. I'm looking at you, Rutgers, and Iowa, even though I think 11-1 of those teams probably would make it, but they could be snubbed. Their schedules are easy. Ohio State's is, I think it's actually one of the toughest schedules in the Big Ten. And that's without them facing themselves, who I think are the best team in the Big Ten. They play Oregon and Penn State on the road, and they host Michigan, and they don't play a Notre Dame or an Oregon or a Oklahoma or a tough non-conference team like Ohio State typically does, to their credit. But it's a tough schedule. And while I do think it's more competitive pressure than hot seat for Ryan Day, I know that the fan base is rabid to defeat Michigan. I know that their players are. That's why they're returning. It's not just to win it all. It's to beat Michigan and win the Big Ten. Because when you look at C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. leaving Columbus without a single win against Michigan, you think, what have we done? Like, what did we waste? The best quarterback in Ohio State history didn't beat Michigan once. And some could say it was due to, cheating, and I'll listen to that in part. But those were 15 and 22 point losses, and in the 22 games specifically, Stroud didn't play so well. I mean, he had one of his least efficient games of the year. So they have to be more efficient. They have to be more physical. They can't be like what they were last year. Last year, do you remember when Ryan Day opted to kick that field goal against Michigan on 4th and 2 instead of go for it? Like everyone thought he would go for it.
Yes.
He kicked the field goal. In retrospect, I think I mentioned in my reaction to that game that actually wasn't a bad decision because his team was so inconsistent that there was no way you could rely on that offense to convert a 4th down and 2 against that defense. That would have been a huge, not necessarily a huge risk, but that could have, I don't know. I don't think there was much of a difference between that play going for it and attempting for the field goal. I think both of them were equally unlikely to produce anything in retrospect. So he just opted, okay, kick the field goal. Our kicker has range and is typically accurate anyway. I mean, they played a better, they have to use their talent efficiently. They've been the most talented Big Ten team forever. Like, even in the 90s, when they had John Cooper, they were more talented than Lloyd Carr's Michigan by recruiting rankings. They've had the most talent forever. In 21 and 22, they probably had the highest ceiling, but Michigan was just more consistent and better coached and tougher. Last year, Michigan was more consistent and tougher, and they had the higher ceiling. They aced Ohio State in every possible way, which is why, despite not having their head coach in Ohio State, I think, playing a pretty good game, given what they had, they still lost. That can't happen again this year. If that happens for a 4th year in a row, it's like what you said. Even if he keeps his job, and even, let's say he's not on the hot seat, maybe because they make a run, or that's just not what Ohio State is, despite the fact that we think that way, or they lose to Michigan, but they win it all, there will be a segment, if not the entire fan base, that's still mad about that, because the game matters that much. And it will hamper them in national title hopes, too, because if they lose to Michigan, depending on what happens, they could miss Indy, or they enter Indy with an L, or let's say they miss Indy entirely. Now you have to go through 4 games to win it all, which requires even more depth and toughness. Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm looking forward to it, man. I mean, that specific part of the college football season, watching this Ohio State team, because they are so talented. It is insane how talented they are. I mean, just you can read all up and down this roster. Emeka Ibuka, a first-round talent coming back. I mean, are you kidding me? Caleb Downs transferring in from Bama. You can go. I mean, I'm looking at a whole list of names right now. I don't just want to read names, but there's a couple just to start you off. They're so talented, so they're going to be fun to watch. And hey, what do we love in sports? We love competition. We love talent. They've got that, and we love big stakes and bright lights. And there's certainly going to be plenty of big stakes and bright lights on Ohio State this year.
That's true. I completely agree with that. Luckily for Ohio State fans, I do think they're going to go undefeated in the regular season. It's just a question of who you play in Indy and how far you go in the national title. But only concern I'd have for Ohio State is maybe quarterback, though they looked good in the spring game. For me, it's mostly trench play and strength and conditioning. Don't suffer injuries. Don't let your O-line look the way it did last year, where you had guys falling over each other, blocking each other. You couldn't open up a hole to save your life unless you had Travion Henderson. Just, that can't happen again. Otherwise, you will lose to an Oregon or a Michigan or to a Penn State, or maybe 2 of them. And you certainly won't be beating Georgia if you have that O-line. Unless Georgia somehow has their worst team under Smart since 2020, and I don't think that's happening. Thank you so much for watching this episode of College Football with Sam. I appreciate it. And I would appreciate it even more if you were to hit that like button, comment your thoughts on this video down below, hit that big red subscribe button, and also click that notification bell so that your phone, laptop, or whatever device you use can ding or buzz whenever I release new content and notify you about it so that you can watch more videos like this. College Football with Sam is the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube. We're going to be doing a giveaway when we hit 20,000 subscribers, and we're trying to become one of the best, if not the best, college football channels on YouTube. Your support means so much, and to those of you who are subscribed to my Patreon or purchase merchandise from my store, the links to those are down in the description and pinned comment. Thank you so much. I want to give a shout out to my Patreons. Thanks to Crash2488 for being a Heisman member. Thanks to Spencer Bringhurst, Chris Lane, and Connor Little OH for being All-American members. And thanks to Will Loftus, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being all-conference members. Have a great day, guys, and if you're listening on Spotify or any non-YouTube podcast platform, please check the link in the channel description to find my YouTube channel. And if you're listening on YouTube, feel free to check out my Spotify, if you so please. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.